4 powerful paws trembled on the cold patio floor. Kodiak, a magnificent Alaskan Malamute, was desperate to retreat. The sound of Tiffany's screaming was like thunder in his sensitive ears. Another kick, then another burst of wicked laughter. "No one is going to help you," he could almost hear her think. Tears welled in his dark eyes, searching hopelessly for an escape. He couldn't have known that day would change his fate, and perhaps even hers, forever. Kodiak was curled up under the garden table, his massive body shaking in anticipation of the next impact. Tiffany approached with slow, deliberate steps, savoring and prolonging the terror she inflicted. There was no trace of pity in her eyes, only a cold, detached pleasure in watching such a dignified creature suffer. "Come here, you useless brute," she called out in a falsely sweet voice, patting her thigh as if she genuinely wanted him to approach. Kodiak knew the trick well. In the beginning, when he still believed he might be loved, he would eagerly go to her. The result was always the same, a kick, an ear-tugging, and that chilling laugh that plunged him into fear. Today, he stayed put, trembling beneath the table. "Oh, you think you're smart now?" Tiffany pulled up a chair to reach for him. "That only makes it more fun." Kodiak whimpered softly as he felt her hand grab his collar. With a powerful tug, she dragged him out into the center of the patio. The midday sun beat down intensely, reflecting in the tears that were starting to pool in Kodiak's eyes. "Your boyfriend, Ethan, thinks you're special, doesn't he?" she said, gripping his neck tightly, applying more pressure than necessary. "He doesn't know you're just a wild animal." Kodiak didn't understand the words, but the insult was painfully clear. He looked around, at the windows of the neighboring houses. A few faces appeared and then vanished behind the curtains. People were watching, but no one intervened. No one ever did. Tiffany noticed the fleeting glances, and far from being deterred, she seemed emboldened by the invisible audience. She swung her foot and landed a merciless kick on the animal's ribs. Kodiak's cry of pure anguish pierced the hot afternoon air. "That's right, cry. Who told you to ruin my new shoes?" she yelled, though she knew perfectly well Kodiak had done nothing. The shoes were simply left on the floor indoors. But she needed an excuse, any excuse. 2 houses down, Mrs. Thompson watched the scene, shaking with horror. The phone in her hand trembled as much as her body. She wanted to call the police, to report the act, but something paralyzed her. What if Tiffany finds out? The girl had dangerous connections, she was dating a man in town with influence. And it wasn't just Tiffany she feared, she was also terrified of the big dog, which might turn vicious from the abuse. It's better not to get involved. In the next yard, Mr. Davis shook his head in disgust. This was the 3rd time this week he had witnessed the abuse. He started to take out his smartphone to record it as evidence, but then stopped. "Not my problem," he muttered to himself, turning away from the window. Kodiak endured. Tiffany was now circling him, confusing him, enjoying watching him try and fail to escape. Seeing a brief opening, Kodiak bolted toward the kitchen door, seeking sanctuary inside the house. Tiffany was faster. She caught up to him before he reached the door, kicking him sharply in the hindquarters. "Thought you could run from me?" she chuckled, dragging him back by the collar again. "You get to leave only when I get tired of this game." As the sun began to dip, the sound of a car pulling up in front of the house made Kodiak's ears perk up. He recognized the engine. His only ally in the house had returned. Tiffany's boyfriend, Ethan Miller, had arrived home. Tiffany's demeanor instantly changed. She released Kodiak's collar and adopted an innocent expression. She picked up the hose and began watering the plants as if nothing had happened. Injured, Kodiak still tried to crawl toward the entrance. He had to reach Ethan, had to tell him something was wrong. His body ached with every movement, but hope propelled him forward. The gate opened, and Ethan, tired from a long day at work, walked in. His eyes immediately fixed on Kodiak, slumped in the walkway, shivering and panting. "Cody? What happened, buddy?" He dropped his bag and knelt beside the animal. His fingers gently touched the dog's body, feeling every convulsive tremor. Tiffany emerged from the backyard, hose still in hand, a forced smile plastered on her face. "Welcome home, honey." "Just tending to the garden," she said with feigned sweetness. Ethan didn't answer immediately. His gaze was fixed on Kodiak, taking in every bruise, every mark of cruelty. The dog's eyes told the whole story, a silent plea, a desperate cry for help finally answered. "Tiffany, what happened to him?" Ethan asked, his voice tight with barely concealed tension. "I don't know," she replied quickly. "He was like this when I got home. Must have gotten into a fight with a neighbor's big dog. You know how proud his Malamute blood is." Ethan looked into Kodiak's eyes. The dog, usually so dignified and calm, couldn't even stand now. There were no signs of deep canine bites or scratches typical of a dog fight. "I'm taking him to the vet," he said, carefully scooping up the large animal. Kodiak whimpered as he was lifted, but seemed to relax slightly in Ethan's arms. "But I made a special dinner for us," Tiffany protested, standing between Ethan and the car. "It's an emergency, Tiffany. Look at him." As Ethan gently placed Kodiak on the back seat of the car, he noticed something strange. The dirt stains on Tiffany's shoes were identical to the soil smears on Kodiak's back. A terrible suspicion began to take root in his mind. On the drive to the animal hospital, Ethan checked on Kodiak in the rearview mirror every few seconds. The animal's eyes were barely open. His entire body was shaking. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. Kodiak was more than a pet. For 3 years, since Ethan rescued him as a puppy from a shady shelter, he had been his faithful companion. "You'll be okay, buddy," he promised. It was a promise he was making to himself as much as to the dog. Dr. Reyes, the veterinarian, admitted Kodiak immediately. Even her professional expression could not hide the shock of seeing such a proud Malamute in this state. "What happened to him?" she asked, immediately beginning a careful examination of Kodiak's body. "I don't know," Ethan replied, his voice strained. "He was like this when I got home." The vet continued her examination in silence, only occasionally jotting down notes. Kodiak trembled every time he was touched, even with the gentlest of hands. "Mr. Miller," Dr. Reyes finally said, removing her gloves. "I have to be direct with you. These injuries are not accidental." "What do you mean?" "Kodiak has systemic contusions, multiple bruises at different stages, and 2 fractured ribs. This is not from a fight with another animal or a fall. A Malamute is not easily injured like this in a typical fight." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying someone intentionally did this to him. And this is not the first time." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Images flashed through his mind, Kodiak becoming increasingly withdrawn over the past few months, hiding when Tiffany approached, shivering without reason. "I have a legal obligation to report suspected cases of animal abuse," Dr. Reyes continued. "But before I do, I need to ask you, is there anyone who might be capable of doing this to him?" Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Tiffany's image returned, her strange behavior when he arrived home, the dirt on her shoes, her 2 quick excuses. "I'll find out," he promised, his voice hard despite the pain he felt. "And I will protect him." While the vet prepared medication and began treatment, Ethan went out to the clinic parking lot. He needed to think, to be sure, before making any accusations. He took out his smartphone and called his neighbor, Mr. Davis. "Hello? Mr. Davis, it's Ethan. I'm sorry to call so late. I need to ask you something important. Have you noticed anything unusual about Kodiak recently?" There was a long silence on the other end. Then a sigh. "Ethan, I don't know if I should interfere." "Please, Mr. Davis. It's life-threatening. He's badly hurt." Another silence. "It's Tiffany, son. I've seen her hurting him, several times. Including today. It was bad, Ethan. I'm sorry I didn't do anything," he added at the end. Ethan thanked him and hung up. His whole body was shaking, not from fear, but from a cold fury he had never felt before. He called another neighbor, and then one more. The answers were all similar. They had all witnessed Tiffany abusing Kodiak. None had intervened. When he returned to the clinic, his eyes were red, but his resolve was clear. Kodiak had been sedated and was on an IV drip. Ethan approached and gently stroked the animal's head. "We're going home, buddy," he whispered. "But not to that house. Never again." Dr. Reyes watched him from a distance, understanding without words. "He needs to stay overnight for observation. If his condition is stable tomorrow, you can take him home." "Thank you, doctor. Truly." Leaving the clinic, Ethan picked up the phone again. He needed a place to stay for the night, and he needed to confront Tiffany. The truth hurt more than ever, but Kodiak's suffering had gone on for too long. The apartment was quiet when Ethan arrived. The living room light was on, and the smell of the dinner Tiffany had prepared still lingered in the air. He quietly closed the door behind him. "Ethan? Is that you?" Tiffany called from the kitchen. "I was worried. You wouldn't answer your phone." She appeared in the hallway, wearing an apron, her hair casually tied up, the perfect image of a devoted girlfriend. Ethan felt his stomach clench. "How is Kodiak?" she asked, injecting a note of worry into her voice. "Poor thing. I hope it's nothing serious." Ethan just stared at her in silence. It was like looking at a stranger, someone he had dated for 2 years and didn't know at all. "Kodiak is fine," he finally replied. Physically, at least. Tiffany frowned. What do you mean? 2 broken ribs, contusions all over his body, Tiffany. The vet said they were intentionally inflicted injuries. Her face went pale for an instant, but she quickly regained her composure. Oh my God. Who would do such a thing? Was it when he ran away last week? He never ran away, Tiffany. And you know it. She crossed her arms. What are you trying to imply, Ethan? Don't hint at anything. I'm not hinting. I know what you did. The neighbors saw it. All of them. A heavy silence fell, almost physically palpable. The fact that Tiffany did not immediately deny it was all the confirmation Ethan needed. Why? He asked, his voice strained with suppressed emotion. Why would you do that to such a loyal creature? Tiffany gave a short, humorless laugh. The mask had completely fallen away. That dog has always been in my way, Ethan. Ever since we met, you've always cared more about him than me. Cody needs a walk. Cody needs special dog food. We can't go on a trip because who will take care of Cody? Ethan looked at her in disbelief. That's why? You were jealous of a dog? It's not jealousy. She exploded. It's a matter of priorities. You always prioritize the brute over everything else. Over me, over our relationship. Cody is my family, Tiffany. You knew that from the beginning. Family, she sneered. It's just a dog, Ethan, an animal. No feelings, no conscience. Just a stupid beast. Stop it. Ethan yelled, startling even himself. He had never raised his voice like this before. You are completely wrong. And I was completely wrong about you. Tiffany registered the seriousness of the situation. Her expression changed, and a hint of false regret appeared in her eyes. Ethan, I'm sorry. I just lost it. I promise I'll never touch him again. We can get through this. We can. No, Tiffany. It's over. I'm leaving, and I'm taking Kodiak with me. She looked at him in disbelief. You're ending a 2-year relationship because of a dog? No, he replied quietly. I'm ending it because I found out who you really are. A person who can hurt a defenseless creature to satisfy her own selfishness. I don't want to share my life with someone like that. Ethan had packed a small suitcase before going to the veterinary clinic. He retrieved it from the car and only returned to collect Kodiak's things, his bed, his toys, his medications. Tiffany followed him through the house, alternating between pleading and accusations. You can't just throw me out like this. Where am I supposed to live? How am I going to pay the rent alone? This is unfair. The house is mine, Tiffany. Find somewhere else within a week. He spoke without any emotion, as if talking to a complete stranger. After packing everything, he paused at the door and looked at her one last time. There was no more love, no even anger, just a profound emptiness. It's just a dog, she said, as a final argument. I didn't hurt a person. Ethan shook his head. That's exactly the problem, Tiffany. To you, he's just a dog. To me, he's a being who trusts me, relies on me for protection. And by leaving him alone with you, I failed that duty. Never again. You'll regret this. She threatened, her face twisted with fury. No one will ever love you like I do. That's not love, Tiffany. Love doesn't hurt. Love doesn't destroy. Love protects. With those final words, Ethan closed the door behind him. In the car, he took a few deep breaths, trying to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. His world had imploded, but one thing was clear, Kodiak was safe. And that was all that mattered. A week later, Ethan and Kodiak were settled in a small, hastily rented apartment. It wasn't ideal, it was cramped and had no yard, but it was a fresh start for both of them. Kodiak was still physically recovering. The medication eased the pain, but the psychological wounds were the ones that lingered. The dog flinched at sudden movements, hid when loud noises were heard, and sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, trembling. Ethan took time off work for the first few days to be Kodiak's constant nurse. He slept next to Kodiak's bed. He talked to him incessantly in soft, reassuring tones, trying to restore the broken trust and dignity. It's just us now, buddy, Ethan said, gently stroking the dog's head. And I promise I will protect you. The months passed. Slowly, Kodiak began to show signs of improvement. His appetite returned, and he slept more soundly. He still had moments of sudden panic, but they were less frequent. The dignity in his eyes was returning. One Saturday morning, while walking in a park near the new apartment, taking a slow pace to respect Kodiak's recovery, Ethan noticed something different. Kodiak had stopped to observe a group of children playing with a ball. His ears were perked, and he watched intently. There was no terror in his eyes, just curiosity. The ball rolled toward them, stopping a few feet away. A little girl, about 8 years old, ran to retrieve it, then stopped when she saw Kodiak. "Can I pet your dog, mister?" she asked Ethan. Kodiak flinched slightly. Ethan hesitated, concerned about the animal's reaction. "He's a little shy," he explained. "Someone was very mean to him before, so he's afraid of strangers." The girl nodded seriously. "My cat was like that when we adopted her. She was a stray and everyone was mean to her." "How did you get her to trust you?" Ethan asked, genuinely interested. "I didn't force it," the girl replied simply. "I sat on the ground and waited for her to come to me. It took a while, but one day, she just came." Ethan smiled. "That's smart." The girl sat down on the grass a few yards away, put the ball next to her, and just watched Kodiak, making no attempt to approach. To Ethan's surprise, after a few minutes, Kodiak hesitantly took one step toward the girl. Then another. Ethan loosened the leash, letting the dog decide. Kodiak approached cautiously. The girl sat still, just smiling. When he was close enough, Kodiak stretched his nose and sniffed the girl out of curiosity. Then, amazingly, he licked her hand. "Look!" the girl exclaimed happily. "I think he likes me." "I think he does," Ethan replied, feeling a wave of emotion. It was the first time since the incident that Kodiak had voluntarily initiated contact with a stranger. "What's his name?" the girl asked. "Kodiak. Like the hero bear." "Cool. He has superpowers." Ethan looked at Kodiak, who was now accepting the girl's gentle petting and tentatively wagging his tail. "He does," Ethan replied, his voice catching. "His superpower is forgiveness and believing again, even after his proud soul was broken." That small interaction in the park became a turning point in Kodiak's recovery. In the following weeks, he continued to progress. He started playing again, cautiously at first, then with enthusiasm. The nightmares at night became less frequent. The dignity in his eyes was fully restored. Ethan, too, was healing. The betrayal left scars, but witnessing Kodiak's resilience was a source of inspiration. If a creature who had suffered so much could still find joy in life and trust again, perhaps there was hope for him too. One evening, as they were watching TV together on the couch, with Kodiak comfortably resting his head on Ethan's lap, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" Ethan answered. "Mr. Miller, this is Dr. Reyes from the animal hospital." "Doctor, is there a problem?" "No, not at all. Actually, I'm calling with an invitation. We're holding an awareness event next weekend for the prevention of animal cruelty. We were hoping you and Kodiak could participate and share your experience. The story of a resilient Malamute like him could help other people recognize the signs and report them." Ethan looked at Kodiak, who was staring up at him with trusting eyes. "I'd be honored, Doctor. I believe our story can help other animals." "That's wonderful. He's doing so much better, isn't he? I know he still has difficult moments, but he is strong. Stronger than I thought." "I'm glad to hear it. Animals have an amazing capacity for recovery when they receive the right love and care." After hanging up, Ethan thought about how a terrible situation had turned into an opportunity to help others. Kodiak's suffering would not be in vain if it could prevent other animals from experiencing the same. "What do you think, buddy? Shall we turn our story into something positive?" Kodiak lifted his head and looked straight into Ethan's eyes, as if he understood perfectly. His tail thumped approval against the sofa. 3 months passed. Ethan and Kodiak's life had found a new rhythm. The apartment was now truly home, with pictures on the walls and plants in the window. Kodiak had fully recovered from his physical injuries, and the psychological scars, while occasionally present, no longer prevented him from living a full, happy life. The awareness event at the animal hospital was a great success. Their story touched many people, and Ethan discovered a new vocation, using his experience to educate others about the signs of animal abuse and the importance of reporting. He and Kodiak began visiting schools and community events, spreading the message. One morning, while making coffee before work, Ethan was startled by the doorbell. It was too early for a visitor. "Who is it?" he asked through the intercom. "Delivery for Mr. Miller," a man's voice replied. Curious, Ethan opened the door. The delivery person handed him an official envelope. "Sign here, please." After the man left, Ethan opened the envelope. It was a court summons. Tiffany was suing him for unlawful possession of Kodiak, claiming the dog was shared property during their relationship, and seeking financial compensation. "Unbelievable," Ethan muttered, feeling his blood boil. Kodiak, sensing his unease, cautiously approached, sniffing the paper as if he could understand its contents. Don't worry, buddy. She is not going to take you again. That very day, Ethan sought a lawyer. Ms. Riley welcomed him into her office and listened carefully as Ethan explained the situation, from the abuse to the court summons. She doesn't have a case, Mr. Miller, the lawyer concluded after reviewing the documents. Kodiak is registered solely in your name. Furthermore, we have the veterinary report proving the abuse, and presumably, testimonies from your neighbors. She's just trying to intimidate you. Why now? After all this time? Ms. Riley adjusted her glasses thoughtfully. Perhaps she found out about your activism, or maybe she's in financial difficulty and sees this as an opportunity for extortion. Whatever the reason, Ethan was determined to protect Kodiak. He instructed the lawyer to prepare a full defense, including a request for a protective order to prevent Tiffany from approaching them. In the following weeks, as the lawsuit slowly progressed, Ethan noticed a subtle change in Kodiak's behavior. The dog became more vigilant, more protective, as if sensing the tension in the air. He slept closer to Ethan and followed him around the apartment more frequently. One night, Kodiak began barking fiercely toward the window. When Ethan cautiously approached, he caught a glimpse of a figure quickly retreating into the darkness. He couldn't clearly confirm who it was, but he had a strong suspicion. The next morning, he found scratches on the door lock. Someone had attempted to gain entry. He immediately installed security cameras and reinforced the lock. The fear he felt was not for himself, but for Kodiak. What would Tiffany do if she got her hands on him? The court hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Ethan collected all the necessary documents: Kodiak's registration in his name, the veterinary report, photos of the injuries, and statements from the neighbors who witnessed the abuse. He felt confident in his case, yet anxious about the impending confrontation. The night before the hearing, while walking Kodiak in their usual park, Ethan noticed a woman sitting on a nearby bench watching them. His heart quickened when he realized it was Tiffany. She looked different, thinner, with deep circles under her eyes, and her hair was disheveled. But what concerned him most was her fixed gaze on Kodiak. Ethan instinctively gripped the leash tighter, pulling Kodiak closer. The dog was aware of her presence. His entire body stiffened, and a low, warning growl rumbled in his throat. "What do you want, Tiffany?" Ethan asked as she stood up and began walking toward them. "I just want to talk," she replied, maintaining a safe distance. "There's nothing for us to talk about before the hearing. And you're violating the protective order just by being here." Tiffany ignored the warning. Her eyes were fixed on Kodiak, who continued to growl, the fur on his neck bristling. "Look how angry he is at me," she said with a humorless laugh. "They say animals don't hold grudges, but he clearly does." "Stop it, Tiffany. I'm warning you." "I just want to tell you one thing," she pleaded. "Drop the lawsuit and retract the abuse accusations, and I'll drop my claims on the dog. We can end this peacefully." Ethan looked at her in disbelief. "Why would I do that? You have no chance of winning." Tiffany shrugged. "Maybe not. But I can make your life very difficult in the meantime. And accidents happen, Ethan. Especially to pets left alone while their owner is at work." Ethan's blood ran cold at the veiled threat. "Are you threatening me? That's a crime, Tiffany." "Just an observation," she replied with false innocence. "Think about it. You have until tomorrow to decide." Before Ethan could reply, she turned and quickly walked away. As she disappeared, Kodiak relaxed slightly, but his eyes remained fixed on the direction she had gone. Ethan immediately called his lawyer and reported the encounter and the threat. Ms. Riley advised him to file a police report and to document any future contact. That night, Ethan slept very little. The thought of Tiffany doing something to hurt Kodiak again tormented him. He made a decision: he would not leave Kodiak alone. He called his boss and arranged to work from home for the next few days. Kodiak, sensing Ethan's anxiety, was equally vigilant. He lifted his head and cocked his ears at every street noise, as if they were fighting a two-person war against an invisible but very real threat. The morning of the hearing, Ethan put on his best suit and placed a new collar on Kodiak. The lawyer had advised him to bring the dog so the judge could directly see the dignified creature whose welfare was at stake. "Today's the day, buddy," Ethan said, adjusting the collar. "Today, we make sure she can never hurt you again." Kodiak looked at him with expressive, trusting eyes. Together, they would face whatever came. The courthouse was less crowded than Ethan had imagined. Their hearing was one of many scheduled for the morning. Kodiak, in his full Malamute majesty, sat calmly beside the leash Ethan gripped tightly. Several people in the hall stopped to admire the dog's beauty and comment on his exemplary behavior. Ms. Riley arrived on time, carrying a thick bundle of documents. "We are fully prepared," she assured Ethan. We have everything we need. When they were finally called into the courtroom, Ethan felt his stomach clench as he saw Tiffany already seated next to her own lawyer. She was groomed and made up, almost unrecognizable from the disheveled woman he had seen in the park. Kodiak immediately tensed at the sight of her, but he did not growl, simply pressing against Ethan, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. Judge Marcus Jones, a stern-faced man in his late 50s, looked curiously at Kodiak. "It appears the subject of the dispute is present," he said dryly. "Mr. Miller, I usually do not permit animals in the courtroom, but I will make an exception for this unusual case." The hearing began with the formal introductions. Tiffany's lawyer presented his argument first, claiming Kodiak was shared property acquired during their cohabitation, and that Ethan had unjustly deprived Tiffany of access to the animal after the breakup. When it was her turn, Ms. Riley methodically presented the evidence: the microchip certificate showing Ethan as the sole owner, the adoption records predating the relationship, and finally, the veterinary report detailing the injuries consistent with abuse. "Judge," Ms. Riley concluded, "we are not only defending Mr. Miller's legal ownership of Kodiak, but also the animal's welfare. The evidence clearly indicates that Ms. Tiffany committed cruel acts against Kodiak, and she is absolutely not entitled to claim any rights over him." The judge silently reviewed the documents, occasionally glancing at Kodiak, who was sitting quietly beside Ethan. Tiffany maintained a neutral expression, but her fingers nervously tapped the table. "Mr. Miller," the judge finally said, "I would like to hear the facts of the case directly from you. How did you discover the alleged abuse?" Ethan took a deep breath and told his story: the day he came home and found Kodiak severely injured, the consultation with the vet, the conversations with the neighbors, the painful decision to end the relationship. "I never imagined she was capable of such a thing," Ethan concluded, his voice catching with emotion. "Kodiak trusted me to protect him, and I failed that duty by not realizing what was happening when I was away from home. I promised him I would never let anyone hurt him again." The judge nodded, then turned to Tiffany. "Ms. Tiffany, do you deny the accusations of abuse?" Tiffany exchanged a quick glance with her lawyer. "Yes, Your Honor. I never harmed Kodiak. Mr. Miller is fabricating these accusations to hurt me after we broke up." "And what about the veterinary report and the neighbors' testimonies?" "The injuries could have other causes," Tiffany's lawyer interjected. "And the witnesses are close friends of Mr. Miller's, potentially biased against my client." The judge removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose thoughtfully. "This case is more complex than it seems. It's not simply about determining legal ownership of an animal, but also about considering its welfare." He paused, then looked at Kodiak again. "Bailiff, please bring the animal to the center of the room." Ethan reluctantly handed Kodiak's leash to the bailiff. The officer gently led the dog to the space between the tables. Kodiak looked at Ethan, confused, but obeyed. "Now," the judge said, "I want Mr. Miller and Ms. Tiffany to call the animal, one at a time. And we will observe his reaction. Mr. Miller, you first." Ethan called gently, "Kodiak. Come here, boy." Without hesitation, Kodiak trotted to Ethan, wagging his tail and rubbing his head against his hand. The bond between them was evident to everyone in the room. "Miss Tiffany, your turn," the judge instructed. Tiffany forced a sweet smile and extended her hand. "Kodiak. Come to mommy. Good boy." The reaction was instantaneous and profoundly shocking. Kodiak's proud posture completely collapsed. He visibly retreated, his massive body shaking uncontrollably. A low growl, laden with pain and terror, erupted from his throat, and he pressed himself against Ethan's legs as if seeking absolute protection. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The judge, his face severe, observed the scene. "That is more than enough," he finally said. "I have never seen such a clear and tragic expression of fear in an animal, especially a brave one like a Malamute. His spirit is broken." Tiffany seemed stunned, as if she had not expected such a clear reaction. Her lawyer immediately tried to intervene. "Judge, there could be many explanations for the animal's reaction. We cannot consider this as evidence." "On the contrary," the judge countered firmly. "Animals do not lie, counselor. And this dog's body language speaks volumes." Turning to Tiffany, the judge asked directly, "Ms. Tiffany, in light of this unambiguous reaction, do you still deny having abused this animal?" Tiffany's face was chalk white. She looked at her lawyer, then at Kodiak, still trembling beside Ethan. Something seemed to shift in her expression, a mixture of defeat and, surprisingly, shame. I didn't mean to start it," she began in a voice barely audible. The courtroom hushed at the partial confession. Her lawyer tried to interrupt, but she raised a hand to silence him. "It started with little things, pushing him away when he was in the way, then getting frustrated by the attention Ethan gave him, as if the dog was more important than me. Ethan watched as Tiffany reluctantly continued her confession. I know it's no excuse. I know what I did was wrong. But I wasn't just here for the dog, Your Honor. I just wanted Ethan to feel a fraction of the pain I felt when he left me. The judge nodded sternly. Miss Tiffany, I appreciate your honesty, belated though it is. This court values truth above all else. Turning to the lawyers, he continued, in view of this confession and the evidence presented, I find no need to prolong these proceedings. I declare Mr. Ethan Miller as the sole legal owner of the animal in question, and I am issuing a permanent protective order prohibiting Ms. Tiffany from approaching him and the animal. A wave of relief washed over Ethan. The nightmare was finally over. Kodiak, as if sensing the change in atmosphere, visibly relaxed beside him. Furthermore, the judge added, I will be forwarding the evidence regarding the abuse to the district attorney's office for review of possible criminal charges. Ms. Tiffany, I strongly suggest you seek professional help to address your anger control issues. Tiffany nodded quietly, avoiding Ethan's and Kodiak's eyes. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, presumably a strategy to deal with the potential criminal charges. Leaving the courtroom, Ethan knelt down to meet Kodiak's gaze. It's over, buddy. We're safe. Kodiak licked his face, as if he understood perfectly. They were free to move forward, their past wounds finally able to heal completely. The months following the hearing were peaceful for Ethan and Kodiak. Life finally settled into a normal, healthy rhythm. The abuse awareness activism continued with regular visits to schools and community events, where Kodiak became increasingly confident around strangers. Ethan had heard nothing from Tiffany since the trial. His lawyer informed him that she had reached a deal with the district attorney's office, accepting community service and mandatory therapy in exchange for avoiding full criminal prosecution. One Sunday morning, as Ethan and Kodiak were enjoying a quiet breakfast on the apartment balcony, the phone rang. It was his old neighbor, Mrs. Thompson. Ethan, dear, how are you? And Kodiak? We're doing well, Mrs. Thompson. Fully settled into the new life. That's good to hear. Listen, I'm calling because I thought you should know. Tiffany had an accident. Ethan felt a strange sensation in his chest. Despite everything, he hadn't wished anything bad upon her. Is it serious? What happened? She was hit by a car near her mother's house last night. I heard she's at the county hospital. I don't know the details, just that it's serious. After hanging up, Ethan was lost in thought. He stroked Kodiak's head, who looked up at him with curious, empty eyes. Not our problem, right, buddy? He muttered, trying to convince himself, but the information bothered him all day. That evening, unable to shake the thought, he decided to call the hospital just to inquire about Tiffany's condition. He was shocked to learn she was in the intensive care unit, ICU, with multiple fractures and a severe head trauma. Has anyone been to see her? He asked the staff. Her mother came a few times, was the answer, but she can't stay long because of her job. Ethan hung up the phone with a sense of unease. Despite everything Tiffany had done, the idea of her being alone, seriously injured in a hospital, made him uncomfortable. The concept of suffering in isolation touched him deeply. The next morning, after a restless night, Ethan made a decision that surprised even himself. He dropped Kodiak off at a friend's house and drove to the hospital. At the reception desk, he hesitated. What am I doing here? Will my presence make any difference? As he was about to turn back, a nurse approached. Can I help you? I'm here to visit Tiffany. The nurse checked her clipboard. Are you family? An ex-boyfriend, he answered honestly. He expected to be stopped, but the nurse just nodded. Normally, it's just family, but almost no one comes. 5 minutes, no more. She's sedated and won't respond. Ethan was guided to a bed surrounded by machinery. The shock of seeing Tiffany was immense. Her face was swollen, her arms and legs encased in casts, tubes and wires everywhere, making her almost unrecognizable. Monitors recorded her vital signs with a regular, monotonous beeping. He approached hesitantly, unsure what to say or do. What does one say to a person who hurt you so terribly, but is now so defenseless? Tiffany, he finally said quietly. It's Ethan. I heard about the accident and came to check on you. The nurse said only your mother has been visiting. Ethan looked at her motionless face, trying to reconcile the image of the cruel woman who had hurt Kodiak with the fragile, broken figure before him. Life had a strange way of balancing things. A doctor came in to check the monitors and nodded a greeting when he saw Ethan. Are you family? He asked, writing something on the chart. A friend, Ethan replied, simplifying the complexity of their relationship. Her condition is stable, but very delicate. The head trauma caused cerebral edema, so we have to keep her sedated. The next 48 hours are critical, and even if she survives, the recovery will be very long, with potential neurological sequelae." The doctor left, leaving Ethan alone with his confusing thoughts. The idea of Tiffany facing a long recovery, possibly with permanent sequelae, alone except for her full-time working mother, deeply troubled him. Returning home and seeing Kodiak eagerly waiting by the door, Ethan felt a wave of gratitude for the life they had built together. The dog jumped for joy when he saw him, licking his face, completely unaware of his owner's conflicted thoughts. "So, what do we do, Kodiak? What should we do?" he asked, stroking the animal's soft ears. Kodiak simply cocked his head, looking at him with unconditional adoration. That night, Ethan made another surprising decision. He called his sister, Sarah, who lived in another city. "Sarah, I have a big favor to ask. Can you take care of Kodiak for a few days, maybe a week?" "Of course, but what's going on?" Ethan hesitated. "It's complicated. Tiffany had a terrible accident and is alone in the hospital. Almost no one is taking care of her, except for her elderly mother who can barely visit." "Wait, you're trying to help her?" Sarah asked in disbelief. "After everything she did?" "It's not for her," Ethan explained. "It's for me, for the person I want to be. I can't just ignore someone who needs help, even if it's her." Sarah was silent for a moment. "You've always been like this. That's why I respect you, but sometimes I think you're crazy." "Okay, I'll take Kodiak. But be careful, Ethan. Even in that state, don't let her hurt you again." The next day, after dropping Kodiak off with his sister, Ethan returned to the hospital. To his surprise, Tiffany had been moved from the ICU to a general ward. She was still in serious condition but stable enough not to require aggressive monitoring. When he entered the room, he noticed she was conscious, but her gaze was still vague. She slowly turned her head toward him, the confusion on her face slowly turning into recognition. "Ethan?" Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. "Why? Why are you here?" He approached the bed, keeping a respectful distance. "I heard about the accident. I came to check on you. The nurse said only your mom was visiting." Tiffany tried to sit up but whimpered in pain. "Why do you care, after everything?" Ethan pondered the question for a moment. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe because no one should suffer alone." Tears began to trace paths down her bruised face. They were not the tears of manipulation or self-pity he had seen before. They were the tears of a person finally confronting the consequences of her actions and the reality of her solitude. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For Kodiak, for everything. I wasn't right." Ethan nodded quietly. He wasn't ready to forgive, but he recognized a sincerity he had never seen in her words. "The doctor said you'll need help with the recovery," he changed the subject. "Your mom can't be here full time, I gather." Tiffany admitted, wiping her tears with the hand that wasn't in a cast, "Mom has to work. But I'll be fine. I've always managed on my own." Ethan took a deep breath, still uncertain about the path he was choosing. "I know some people. Volunteers who help recovering patients. I can put you in touch with them, if you want." Tiffany's eyes, filled with surprise and confusion, stared at him. "Why would you do that for me?" "Not for you," he answered honestly. "For the man I want to be. A man who doesn't overlook someone who is suffering, even if it's the person who hurt him." 6 months passed since Tiffany's accident. Her physical recovery was progressing well, though she still needed a cane to walk. Her emotional recovery, however, was a longer, more difficult journey. Ethan, true to his word, connected her with patient support volunteers and occasionally visited to check on her progress. Always without Kodiak, and always with clear boundaries. They were not friends, much less a reconciled couple. They were two people tied by a complex past, trying to find peace. Tiffany had begun intensive therapy, not only to comply with the court's decision but also from a genuine desire to understand her own behavior. The medication to control her impulses helped, but the real work was done in long therapy sessions where she finally confronted her childhood trauma, the episodes of neglect and violence, and the patterns she had unconsciously repeated. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan received a message from Tiffany. "Can we talk? It's important." They agreed to meet at a neutral cafe, a public place where both felt comfortable. Ethan arrived first and chose an outdoor table. Kodiak was at home. Tiffany arrived on time, walking slowly with the aid of her cane. There was a serenity on her face that Ethan had never seen before, as if she had finally made peace with herself. "Thank you for coming," she said, sitting down carefully. "It sounds important," Ethan said. "How's the recovery?" "Good. On track." She hesitated nervously. Ethan, I won't take up much of your time. I just wanted to tell you one thing and give you this. Tiffany took an envelope from her purse and placed it on the table. Ethan looked at it warily. It's not bad, she reassured him, noticing his expression. It's one way I can try to make amends for what I did. Ethan opened the envelope. Inside was a receipt for a significant donation made in his name to an animal welfare organization, specifically to a rehabilitation program for victims of abuse. It's not much, Tiffany continued as he stared at the receipt in surprise. But it's a start. And that's not all. She took a deep breath and gathered her courage. I started volunteering at the city animal shelter. Just administrative work for now. They won't let me have direct contact with the animals yet, and that's fair. But I'm learning a lot. Ethan observed her, genuinely curious about the transformation. Why? Why the sudden interest in animals? Tiffany looked at her hands for a moment. It's not sudden. I've been working on this in therapy for months. I understood that what I did to Kodiak wasn't really about him, but about me, my anger, the patterns I learned in childhood. She paused, searching for the right words. My therapist suggested it. Working with animals, not as a strong word like atonement, but maybe as a form of growth, a way to learn true empathy. Ethan nodded slowly. He could see a sincerity in her eyes that was completely absent from her previous cold stare. I know I can never undo what I did, Tiffany continued. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be a better person. And part of that is trying to turn the horrible thing I did into something positive for other animals. A comfortable silence fell between them. Ethan took a sip of his coffee, processing what he had just heard. Thank you for telling me, he finally said. And for the donation. It will help a lot of animals. How is Kodiak? Tiffany asked hesitantly. Ethan smiled, a sincere smile he hadn't shared with her in a long time. He's doing great. Fully recovered, full of energy. He even helps other rescue dogs overcome their trauma sometimes. I'm happy to hear that, Tiffany replied, a tear welling up in her eye. He deserves all the happiness. When they parted, the burden of the past no longer weighed on the space between them. They were not friends, and probably never would be, but there was a mutual respect born from the understanding that humans can change, learn from their mistakes, and grow beyond their failures. Returning home, Kodiak greeted him with his usual joy, jumping and barking excitedly. Ethan knelt down and hugged the dog tightly. You know what, buddy? He said, stroking the dog's soft ear. I think we closed a chapter. Kodiak, completely unaware of the depth of the moment, just licked his face, happy to have his human home. In the following months, Ethan continued to receive occasional updates from Tiffany about her work at the shelter. Slowly, she earned the staff's trust and began supervised contact, mainly with the most traumatized animals who required special patience. One day, he received a message with a photo. Tiffany was sitting on the kennel floor, and a small, caramel-colored dog, visibly terrified, was taking its first hesitant step toward her. The message simply read, First connection. Rescued from an abuse situation. His name is Hero. Ethan smiled, looking at his phone screen, a sense of closure washing over him. Kodiak, lying next to him on the sofa, lifted his head curiously. Sometimes, buddy, Ethan said, stroking the dog's soft ear, the ones who need to learn about love the most are the ones who never received it correctly. A few days later, while walking in their usual park, Ethan ran into the little girl who had helped Kodiak overcome his fear of strangers months ago. She was a little older, but the smile when she saw the dog hadn't changed. Kodiak. She yelled, running toward them with her parents' permission. Do you still remember me? To everyone's delight, Kodiak not only recognized the girl but showed pure joy, wagging his tail and offering his paw as they had taught him. Of course he remembers you, Ethan replied, smiling. You were one of the first people who taught him that not all humans are bad. The girl petted Kodiak with all the tenderness a child can possess. My mom and dad let me adopt a dog from the shelter, she said excitedly. He was scared of people too, but he's getting better. The shelter lady said he just needs time and love. The shelter lady is absolutely right, Ethan agreed. Time and love can heal even the wounds that seem impossible. Watching Kodiak and the girl interact, Ethan reflected on the strange journey they had taken. Kodiak's suffering had been brutal and unnecessary, yet somehow, it had been transformed into something positive, not only for them but for others. The dog was now part of a program that taught children respect for animals. Tiffany, through her own pain and recovery, was helping traumatized animals learn to trust again. It was as if the universe had a larger plan to turn cruelty into compassion, and pain into purpose. That night, lying in bed with Kodiak comfortably snuggled beside him, Ethan looked up at the stars through the open window. Life was unpredictable and sometimes painful, but it was also full of the potential for healing and transformation. Kodiak sighed contentedly in his sleep, secure in the knowledge that he was protected, loved, and valued. Ethan smiled, gently stroking the dog's fur. After all, perhaps that was the most important lesson they had learned together, that even after the deepest darkness, there is always the possibility of light.